think so. Are you ready? Yes. Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would you please stand with me and recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for coming out on this beautiful evening. The first item on our agenda will be our commission reports. We're going to start with Commissioner Moore. She has something that she's actually written up, and so we're going to let her present her side of this first. So,
okay, I attended a workshop last week at the AWC headquarters, and the workshop was actually sponsored by a risk management agency that we're not affiliated with, but AWC is. And the topic of the workshop was pipes and policies, understanding utility funding needs. There were not, it wasn't a real packed house, so it was really nice in that it was very interactive, and I was able to get very specific information as to our situation. So I'm just going to read this so I don't goof it up. The goals were to appreciate the issues around the condition of utilities and how they directly impact community sustainability, and for elected officials to realize we are stewards of critical resources and have a responsibility to maintain the systems and the funding so the infrastructure is in better shape physically and fiscally in the future. The objectives, as we go along here, number one is gain an understanding that pipes, pumps, and valves have a certain life cycle and proactively plan for ongoing repair and replacement, and that is critical. The part that is specific to Shelton is that much of our infrastructure in our city is 60 to over 100 years old. The average design life is 50 to 80 years, so we've outlived a lot of our usefulness. It is underground, it's not very glamorous, and as long as it works, we don't want to spend money on it. We have to appreciate the sacrifices of the generations who came before us and provided us with utilities that have enabled us to go on for so many years with reliable services and low rates. Also, something that is relevant and trending throughout the nation is that many of the municipal employees have worked for cities for 40 years or more and are retiring with the institutional knowledge of the systems captured in their brains and not necessarily transferred to paper. We have to make it a priority to capture that knowledge. And we are seeing that happen with the recent retirements of a couple of our long-term employees. We have to appreciate the impact of delayed and deferred maintenance as it dramatically increases future costs, including municipal liability, emergency repair costs, loss of citizen support and confidence, as well as the ever-increasing material and project costs. Publicly owned utilities are provided by and belong to the citizens. Too often there is a lack of understanding that diligent maintenance and expansion adds value to the citizen investment and to the community as a whole. We have to consider the affordability of utility rates, and we have to consider tools to help manage rate increases. The City of Shelton offers 17% reduced rates to those who qualify for low-income, disabled, and low-income elderly ratepayers. We could potentially expand on that program, but the costs for running our utilities would have to be made up by the rest of the ratepayers who are currently also struggling to pay these bills. Some jurisdictions in Washington raise the rates for out-of-city limits customers, charging people in the urban growth areas more to help offset the fees of city residents. However, there's It's very cumbersome and it's not very effective. We need to develop a capital improvement plan and commit to funding that plan. Part of that is it is very important to identify and inventory components of our system and rate conditions in planning improvements and on ongoing maintenance. It's not glamorous or fun, but will prevent large-scale emergency capital replacements. If done correctly, much of the future funding can be raised in existing rate structure. As debt is paid, the rates build a reserve fund to be used for future projects. This is considered a conservative method of building a savings plan, lessening the need for borrowing money to fulfill needed repairs and expansion. Reserves can also be used to help fund capital improvements as one-time dollars. Borrowing is also a good choice for capital improvement projects. I was surprised to learn this because typically the low-interest loans have little impact on rates and allow projects to be completed at today's costs. We need to understand the pitfalls of using utility reserves to fund general operations. Sometimes this is used to enable lower rates. It is not sustainable. You may have lesser rates for a while, but it can be disastrous in an emergency situation. An example of this is the city of Tenino has a newer treatment plant, I believe it's 5 years old, but has not raised rates to cover costs due to political pressure. They are facing an immediate $45 increase in sewer rates because they are floundering. We need to understand the impact that poor systems, failed or at capacity, have on community growth and viability. High-quality infrastructure is smart stewardship of public funds and investments. Defunded or neglected infrastructure investment reads as a sign the community doesn't have the will or confidence to invest in its future. It doesn't portray success or desire to move forward, and projects apathy rather than energy. So that was the teaching part, and at the end of the teaching part, I had an opportunity to ask a number of questions of the experts there. Is there a way to reduce current rates? Debt service and operation costs must be paid. We can look at deductions for classifications of customers, but those would have to be subsidized by other rate payers. To reduce rates for some would increase rates for others. That's the typo. Rats. Oh well. Are there any funds for rate reduction across the board, such as grants? No. When and if funds become available for infrastructure improvements, they will be directed to emergency projects. There is no foreseen funding for public works until at least 3 bienniums have passed. All the monies have been diverted to fund education, and the day after I attended this class is when it was announced that the state was being fined $100,000 per day for not funding education. So it was timely. Can we reduce rates as the debt service is paid off and we get more customers? Not responsibly. As debt is reduced, we build savings to fund future projects. A pay-as-you-go account that will mean we won't have to borrow as much and will enable us to avoid extreme rate increases. A large city, and forgive me, I can't remember which one, recently reduced rates because they didn't have any upcoming projects and the rates were going along great and people wanted to pay less. And the city had a major catastrophe and had depleted their reserves, meaning a huge loan and higher rates than before. Can we depend on grants for our funding needs? Grants are getting more competitive, more matching funds are required. Conservative funding is identifying how to pay for improvements without grants and considering grants a bonus. So I was fairly discouraged at the end of this and had hoped to get some creative ways that we could reduce our rates, that we could maybe give our citizens some bright hope to look at. So at the end, as I was voicing that it was kind of discouraging, the people who were teaching the class pointed out to me that they are actually using Shelton as an example of a community doing things right. We are moving ahead responsibly in a very difficult economic season, but we'll be far ahead of the many communities who are facing even larger costs with fewer opportunities for grants and low-interest loans. There's no question at all, no question, everyone agrees that our rates are too high for the income level of our citizens, estimated to be about $50 too high for the average income. But there is not a viable alternative at this time. Many communities will be faced with an even larger affordability gap as they are forced to fund their failing systems with whatever methods are available. This crisis is expected within the next 10 to 20 years. So by that time, we should be pretty well along, and our rates will probably be very comparable, if not lower, than these other cities that will be in this extreme situation. So that was my report. It was a very good class. I'm really happy that I went. I got some information on potential funding avenues, but it's going to be a challenge. And that's it. That's my report.
All right. Did you include any meetings you're doing today or sidewalk, chalk thing?
Yes, indeed. I would like to. Say what I'm doing this week for fun. I will be participating in Chalk the Walks all day tomorrow at Sidewalk Chalks. It sounds like it's going to be all over the city. We will be doing hopeful messages and happy thoughts on our sidewalks. So it should be really fun to walk around and see what the creative people in our community are coming up with. I had another commitment, so my regular briefing will be Thursday. And then on Saturday, I'm so excited. The Shelton Dog Park is opening Saturday, 10 o'clock, down at the dog park, which is down by Meeland Park. Hopefully a lot of people will show up and bring their dogs. So that's
all
my
right.
week.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson?
First of all, thanks for that report, Tracy. I think it might be kind of good to put that out to the public. If you could print copies up, maybe if we can pass them around or something, it's kind of educational. Easily put.
There was a lot more information, a lot more that was graphs and, much more than I could convey right here.
Sure. No, that was great. Today I attended the final exit audit for the City of Shelton, and happy to say once again we had no findings. A few little comments, but nothing major. Another great job on Kathy's staff side, and they complimented the city on that too, that we're one of their favorite to work with because the staff is so easily approachable and gets them everything they need on time and get them out of here fast. So I'm happy to hear that again, that we once again, what's that in a row, 15, 17 or something? Who counts? We get so many of them, right? And then tomorrow I have a Mason Transit Authority Board meeting. And Saturday, even though I don't own a dog, much to my wife's displeasure, I will be going to the dog park just to be able to watch them run around. So that's my report.
All right, well, this week, on Wednesday, I will be attending a criminal justice meeting. I'm on the Criminal Justice Board for Mason County. And on Thursday, I'm planning to attend an event out at Mason Lake with the EDC, Chamber, and Green Diamond. On Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I will be camping at Dosey Wallops in my little two-person tent with a group of people. And so I've done this every year, and I'm looking forward to it because I enjoy camping. My wife could enjoy me getting one of them $75,000 RVs if we could afford to do that, but I just kind of like getting in that tent and just kind of hanging out. So I will comment a little bit about Commissioner Moore's report. Obviously, we all know where we stand on different issues. We've been here a long time, and I think it's a good report. The only thing I would say is this is taken totally from the eye view of inside of government, and it's the way that government has kind of always operated. They've always operated this way, and what happens is sometimes it's the proper way to do things. Well, sometimes when you get out into the fields and you start talking to grandma and grandpa and the citizens, sometimes you have to take some of these, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do if you have money. It's also that the part there that, and again, I'm not coming against Commissioner Moore at all. I'm just saying that my take on it, I wrote down a bunch of notes, and when we started Basin 3, it was $1.3 million in grants, and everyone said you can't get more grants, and don't try and do it, and whatever they say. And that now is up to, I think, 3.4. And it was because we kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And there is more grant money available. In fact, my goal, if I am able to complete what I'd like to do, and that would be to actually get the full $3 million grant on top of that. So that's, I'm having a real problem in talking to the citizens about borrowing more money or how much more. The representatives from Denny Heck's office, the lady penciled it out, and she said we are 94% complete on all infrastructure projects. And that's a good thing. And we all wish that big development had kind of helped us pay for it. But we have to think outside the box on this stuff because the state regulators or the state staff people will keep telling you these creative ways to do things, and it always comes back to just kind of putting the tab on the people. And I think outside the box. In my business, I have to think outside the box, and that's what I like to kind of do here. So I think it's proof that we have $1.4 million in grant money for Basin 3. When we started, it was 1.3, and if those numbers are wrong, this is, Kathy Byerly told me, approximately. Approximately. So, Gordon, when you're penciling that one out. But there is a difference in philosophy on how we can do this stuff. And my statement I made a while back is that we cannot continue to build future infrastructure solely, and the word solely, on the backs of the existing businesses and ratepayers. That's a true statement. And I have proven that in the money I've gotten or helped get on Basin 3, and I'm still pushing. And so what happens is these are stock things that are good, and they're, if you had a bank account that was like $14 billion and we could just draw money from and move along the road happily, but we're not in that situation. And sometimes you have to look at things a little differently. So I would like to keep fighting for more grant money than what they'll tell you can get. I would not like to raise the rates more. We are in a pretty good situation. We've got one major basin, and that's Basin 3, and I see no joy in raising rates anymore. I mean, I just don't see it. And so I think this is a well-written report. It's very nice, but it's only one idea. Reserves are meant for a purpose. And if you have reserves and if you have people that can't pay their bills, then maybe that is the time you'd use a reserve. And again, it's new growth. We're getting a new mill in town. Shelton Hills is going to be starting. So I'm excited about, hopefully, Shelton can kind of get into where we're going to get more money to help pay for these things. But our infrastructure, the reason they want to give us awards is because we did it. All we need to do is figure out how we can pay for it other than continually just raising rates on a tax base that cannot afford to do it. So,
excuse me, but part of the report as well was a way of funding and looking at it that did not require raising rates, that raised the money for future improvements within the existing rate structure. So more than raising rates, it was not lowering rates.
it's a good point. And you have to maintain your equipment. There's no doubt about that. You have to have that, and that has to be in there. But there's a real shaking kind of going around on how you're going to fund all this stuff. And I'm glad that we're like 94% complete on our major sewage treatment plant and basin projects. It's taken a long time to get here, I think that, we just have to keep kind of smacking it away at it, but I would much prefer to try and find some money out of these existing payers' pockets. And so, it's just another way to look at it, and that's kind of how I look at it, and I've said that kind of from the beginning. So that completes our commission reports, I think, unless there's more. Not everybody agrees on the way you do things, and that's nothing wrong with that. I have no personal agenda with Commissioner Moore or Commissioner Olson. Everyone looks at things a little differently, and all I know is I work, number one, for the citizens inside this city, and then number two and number three is for everybody else. And so we have big decisions to make, and we make them every day, and this is not anything personal. It's just I know that we have to look outside the box if we want to truly serve the citizens here. So that's it. There's a general public comment period. If anybody would like to speak, I would say we are open, since we only have 2 people from the public. If not, there will be another opportunity a little farther down the line. So, the consent agenda, are we ready for a reading of the consent agenda? Could we please have a reading of the consent agenda?
Vouchers numbered 86432 through 86552 in the amount of $472,091.96. Payroll warrants numbered 74082 through 74260 in the amount of $679,833.78. Transfer and baking fees in the amount of $20,124.73. Commission meeting minutes of business meeting of August 3rd, 2015. Materials Testing Lake Boulevard Contract Award, Maze Testing Engineers, Inc. Authorize the mayor to sign when returned from contractor and city. Wastewater treatment plant final acceptance. Work by construction.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
So moved.
I second that motion.
There's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The consent agenda passes. Under old business, we do have an issue on the Lake Boulevard Pioneer Way Construction Award, and we're going to be briefed on that subject by our city engineer, Mike Michael.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. City Administrator O'Leary has mentioned that he brought it forward that we don't have quite all the answers tonight, but I know one of the pressing questions that was asked last week when we talked about this was how long do we have? I did look in the contract. The contract that we wrote and was bid on has the standard 45-day clause between bid opening and award. So as of tonight, we still have about 30 days without any extra steps that have to happen in there. Again, we have that standard 45-day clause. We do have some of the answers back on funding. have been in communication with the folks at TIB off and on most of the day. The portion of work that I identified last week and again, we're primarily discussing the sewer schedule on this. That was the main question. As you remember, the street portion was right in the price range we expected and well within the funding we have through TIB. TIB has agreed that the approximately $40,000 of sewer work that is at the very beginning of the potential sewer extension is eligible under the TIB grant as part of the road project because of the necessity to move it due to the new storm sewer line. So that piece has been taken care of. Though not very positive on the partial funding for the rest of it, that is still in process, and that's the portion I do not have an answer on this evening. Chris Workman with TIB is working through the director and others at this time to ask the question, explain our position, and our thinking behind our request for approximately $150,000 to supplement the sewer funding. and is hoping to have an answer back to us in the next day or two. But I had nothing at the time of the beginning of the meeting, so that piece is still to be determined. As far as the existing sewer funds, Kathy and I have done some head scratching and digging through records and budget numbers and all of that today, and pretty much confirmed the numbers that we originally, or that I originally presented the commission several months ago. According to the best information we have right now on where we project to be at the end of this year, there's about $350,000 cash expected to be in the bank, so to speak, at the end of the year. Of that, we need $100,000 approximately for cash flow purposes. So as of today, it appears we have about $250,000 of cash to use towards this project.
So that leaves us 150 short.
About 150 short. Now we have several options. We have the TIB option. We expect this work to roll into next year, so we have revenues into next year that we could count on and look towards. To that end, as I mentioned last time, we have some planned work in the rate models that's supposed to start next year. From next year ongoing for the duration of the model, there's plan as part of a follow-on to Basin 3 to do continual additional I&I work at about $200,000 plus inflation a year. So starting next year in the model which generates the rates, we have about $200,000 planned. And then starting in 2017, it's actually closer to $250,000 and escalating because we're adding a second small O&M project into that pot as well. So the I&I work in particular was predicated on a follow-on to Basin 3. As we haven't completed the Basin 3 work yet, it does make sense to also delay that work equivalently. So under our current rate structure, there is that potential revenue that we could look at. We're also seeing some potential savings in a few other areas that were not as big as, say, this I&I work that we noted in there. But that's basically where we're at this point, and it really is it's a hard decision. It's good work that should probably be done, but the cash is definitely tight in the sewer fund at this point. So
I will say that I have been in contact with Denny Heck's office, and his staff was extremely supportive of that and thought that maybe they would be able to come through with some funding. But I think that maybe they had planned a little bit more than they could actually accomplish, because they are suggesting at this point that we contact USDA. So, and I think that process is a longer one, so I think that unfortunately that is not going to happen. So I haven't talked to Derek Kilmer yet, though.
I got into this as well since I've returned. Just a few thoughts that occurred to me that I think you may want to factor into your decision. One is the draw on potential new development just based on the fact that we're improving the road. You're going to put improved road, you put improved sidewalks, you put street lighting up there, and it'll be much more inviting than it is now. So the question is, if you put the road in, and then you don't put in the sewer lines, and then somebody says, whoa, new road, I think this looks like a nice place for a subdivision. You want to take a fairly close look at that to see whether that's viable. Maybe if that's the strategy, if that's the concern, maybe you don't have to go as far as clear to the end of the city limits. That's one issue. Another issue that turned up today, and Mike and I don't know that Mike heard this one, but we were counting on $200,000 a year in excess cash flow from the current rate structure and debt obligations yielding $200,000 a year. And that may not pan out because as we lose the Simpson Mill, there's a $120,000 a year customer. So that'll be replaced with whatever is coming now from Simpson/Olympic panel products will be replaced with SPI, which is likely to be less because they'll have less people on the site and probably more efficient operations than you're getting from those two operations as well. So the cash flow that we're counting on from the 200,000 probably can't be counted on because of the change in the business model. On the other hand, if other development happens, then you'll be able to put that back. Then we'll pick up activity from other development over the years as these are added on. So I think those were the only thoughts. It just it occurred to me that maybe there is a draw up there for development, and I was particularly worried about that because we hadn't talked about that before. So I think those are a couple of new things that we've occurred to that we haven't really had a chance to look at in enough depth. And so although it says action on the agenda, I was concerned about trying to take action tonight until we had a chance to flesh that out a little bit more for you.
I did call Dave O'Leary today earlier, and I am concerned about it. It's a tough decision. It's not just don't do it or just do it. Do you have any housing developments of 100, 200 housing units? Do you have anything planned or people coming in with the property saying, I want to do this on that road?
We haven't had any specific housing developments in that area, but we have had interest in for various reasons. Existing developed properties, as I presented to the commission a couple weeks ago, we've had a few of those over the last couple of years that are having issues with their septic and have been asking us questions about getting connected up. We have had a couple of the smaller, probably not subdividable pieces asking questions about sewer availability. And then as you saw in the presentation a couple of weeks ago, as we look at what's already there, the Beverly Heights development in itself, the plat of Beverly Heights, there's approximately 100 plus or minus existing lots there ready to be built on. A lot of them already fronting on either Lake Boulevard or a couple of the developed adjacent roads that, other than the sewer connection, really are there and ready to go. Those that aren't right on Lake Boulevard potentially have some short extensions that they would have to do on the side streets, such as California and others. But when we did the count based on the existing plat, even though the parcel map at the county doesn't show it, there are in the neighborhood of 100 existing lots out there that are pretty much developable at this point.
But wouldn't that cost them a whole lot more to extend it? I mean, they're not, some of those you're talking about are long, skinny lots off of Lake Boulevard to where, they'd have to short plat it out and then, there's no access to bring it back, no easements to get through the properties. So the cost would be so high for them to develop that.
Those are actually, I think the ones...
They're over 300 feet away, too, so they wouldn't be required.
Yeah, I think the ones you're thinking about are probably south of Lake Boulevard, and those, actually, there's some existing platted right-of-ways in there that are unopened right now. So those are the ones that would take a little bit of extra work. There's some sewer extension, water extension, road improvements that would be required as part of those. The ones north of Lake Boulevard predominantly are abutting existing opened roadways, and though they may have some additional sewer extension, the cost of getting it to the Beverly Heights development is taken care of, and that's been the big driver that's pushed away, particularly the existing developed properties, from doing what needs to be done to take care of potentially failing septics out there. That's kind of scared them away as far as the cost of getting the sewer close enough to actually hook up.
So how far out could you go if this project was cut in half? if you only had the 250 to work with that you have now? How far out could you go, and would that be far enough to go to accommodate for any future larger developments rather than one here, one there?
I don't believe so. I have to go look at that in detail, but when I looked at it a week or so ago, there was about 800 to 1,000 feet that made sense to cut back. Basically, the far southerly end of the project, we're really not rebuilding the road. We're just kind of blending into what's there with an overlay. That seemed like a reasonable stopping point. The next point, northerly, really doesn't seem to get us any significant benefit for the expense of putting it in there, and I don't think we would be down to that $250,000 mark at that point
So say
anyhow.
if you went up to, I don't know the name of the road, the one that comes behind Meridian Park,
Yes, Wyoming.
Wyoming, can you get to there?
I don't believe so. That would be the next logical break point, is that Wyoming point, and that's actually about 2/3 to 3/4 of the total length of
That
the.
covers most of any potential larger developments too. And then after that, it seems like it's all single skinny lots from there on out.
Yeah, and the main drawback there is, as I see it, the big draw is those existing developed lots that are potential to need new septics here in the near term. Getting to Wyoming doesn't pull them to within the 300 foot. So there would be some additional extensions necessary there. You've also got the issue of some of the larger undeveloped blocks of lot are actually south of Lake Boulevard and more towards the end of the project, more towards the city limits there as well.
Another thing that I've mentioned before, but I don't hear discussed, I haven't heard was discussed, but I have discussed it some with you all, is that of competing demands for the money. So we're talking about sewer money, it can only be spent on sewers. I don't know what the other choices are. What I worry about is if the money is spent on this, then have you got it left over for something else? Or, alternatively, if there's nothing else that we need it for, then this gets easier, and to spend put some level of funding into this project. So I'd like to get a better sense of what are the, what are the other demands for sewer capital money.
Right.
Other than what we're expecting, which is the small I&I projects.
Right. That's basically it in the CIP, other than Basin 3 being delayed as it has been. Really what we have left is the I&I projects that we've stuck in the O&M area. Some ongoing O&M kind of upkeep projects at about $50,000 a year starting in 2017. And then we don't show any other major improvement projects until about 2019, and those are identified as developer-driven projects at that point anyhow.
So we've got, for instance, the Intertie project that we've got $1.5 million grant on. Are we going to have to put any local money with that, or is that going to be done with that grant and with developer money?
It's primarily grant and developer money. There may be a small, a few $1,000s worth of local money in that, but it's predominantly the grant and developer money in that case.
So you're saying we can do that out of cash flow rather
Yep.
than trying to borrow money from another pot in order to be able to make the project go.
Right. That's actually in this year's budget, and looking at the numbers, the biggest local piece, and I haven't talked to Steve what the discussion was with the developer on how this piece would be covered, but the biggest local piece was the indirect charge. Staff time was a few $100s on that one, so not a lot of savings there that can be going to other projects. The other one was, now I'm drawing a blank, there was one other grant-funded project in there for this year right now. And similar situation, the big local piece aside from the grant funding was the IDC, and then a little bit larger staff time piece associated with that. Together, they totaled about $10,000 in staff time that got up to the $350,000 that we're talking about as far as cash.
A couple other projects that occur to me that we've discussed, and I'm not sure whether they're formally on a capital facility plan, except through other means. In one case is Northcliffe Road, because we've got a temporary line in Northcliffe Road right now to handle development that happens north of Northcliffe, actually outside city limits, but still there's a public policy interest in providing service for them. And right now we've got it into a temporary line that will have to be replaced with a permanent one that will actually provide more capacity. And the other one is a line along Olympic Highway North that will need to be upgraded so that when the intertie is done, you can actually put additional sewage in it to get down to the main plant if you have to push sewage out of the satellite plant to get there.
Yeah.
So that needs to be upsized. In addition to doing the intertie, it also needs to be upsized along there too.
The Northcliffe project isn't specifically identified on its own. It's buried within the Basin 3 project in all of the funding and capital planning. The collector main that you're talking about along Mountain View area is embedded in this large developer-driven project that's shown at about 2019. It, again, isn't separated out all by itself, but it is intermixed in those projects.
So even if Shelton Hills goes, we're going to be able to react to it over time because it's going to develop slowly over the next 20 years. So they're not going to put sewage into that immediately. It's something we can react to.
Correct.
And the payment for that is going to be driven probably by a developer's agreement that's currently about to be negotiated with Mark Hall.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's predominantly going to be GFCs or equivalent funds because we're talking, and even this project, we're talking primarily capacity increase for development purposes. So every project we do that is capacity increase for development is eligible to be reimbursed from the GFCs that come in now and into the future. So.
If I could jump in just for a second, what we're talking about, is $250,000, is that grant money available? Is that what we're talking about?
It's not grant money. It's actually cash projected to be in the sewer account come the end of 2015.
Where's that money come from?
That's residual out of the rates that's not being spent on existing capital that we are building and the O&M cost to the utility this year.
So that rate, just to clarify things, that's money we have now, or what if in January we choose not to raise the rates on water? If we choose not to do that, is some of that figuring into that?
No, that's not. That's just looking at a snapshot of where we started this year and where the revenue and expenses for this year are projected to go. This year.
So 250 is included. It's money that we have that we can spend on that. But we could easily, can't we spend it on Basin 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's.
Could we spend it on extending that sewer line you were talking about, the temporary one that we need to make full-time sometime? So.
Yeah, the cost of that, from my discussions with Mike, is about $500,000, and yeah, I'm not sure I understood your question before. Maybe Mike did either, about the more strategic question, which is about what if we don't raise rates?
Yeah.
I don't know what the impact with that would be. We have an obligation to raise rates in order to be able to meet an obligation to the Department of Ecology and principally to meet debt service requirements. It's conceivable that we could roll back rates increases that have already been approved, and then not accumulate that $200,000 a year towards I&I projects.
So
but then that would violate the compliance order with ecology and would risk all kinds of trouble. I would not recommend that you do that.
Yeah, I understand. Just think outside the box, though.
Okay.
This $250,000, if we didn't put it into the sewer line, that could help us in not raising the rates for a one-year period or whatever. Could we not use that money to deflect that added? Isn't that about what we were looking at?
It's conceivable that you could delay the increase in the rates, but my suggestion would be, if you're going to do that, that you just delay, that you don't put off, because at the end of the day, you're going to have a certain amount of cash flow, whether you collect it, whether you say you didn't increase rates in 2016 and your last rate increase is in 2020. Then you'd need, so if you didn't increase it in 2016, you darn well better put it on at the end of 2021, or you will not have enough money to make the bond payments and meet the obligations that we're obliged to meet under ecology.
Nobody's into throwing the city into bankruptcy.
Okay.
But we do have priorities. And I'm thinking, if I had a priority of $250,000 on this sewer line, and I could use that money for the other priorities that the city may have, like Basin 3, so we don't get thrown in jail over that one, or delaying water rates going up for a 1-year period of time.
You don't mean water rates, you mean sewer rates.
Yeah.
You mean sewer rates or water rates?
Well, sewer, water rates, yeah, either
Okay,
one.
all right.
Whatever that money could be used for. I mean, when I pay my bill, my water and sewer seem to be tied into one.
Can't use the water
thing,
rates to
so.
pay for the sewer rates.
Yeah, I can't do that. No. Sorry if I'm insulting anyone in my lack of intelligence on these things, but there may be a decision that we have to make, because we might not be able to do things exactly the way the textbook is calling for them. So I'm merely throwing that up because it's why we're sitting here talking about this. Are we going to put $250,000 in that line? And I understand that it's a paved street, but at some point you got to figure where you can put money into situations, because the money we get is from the ratepayers, and they unfortunately are slightly angry right now. And that's all I'm trying to bring into this conversation. They're the ones I work for. You know, I don't have to pretend I work for anybody else. They're the ones that I have to work for. And in this discussion, I've been trying to put brakes on this stuff for 4 years. This might be one where we have to put the brakes on it. Maybe not, but I am merely voicing my opinion that at some point we need money from other sources to continue to build this kind of infrastructure. That's all. I'm a simple guy.
Mike, on your I&I things for 2016 and 2017, if indeed you took, if we funded this now, that means you're just going to push everything back unless we get lots of GFCs all of a sudden or something. You're just going to push it out again another year.
Exactly, that would be the thought. And as I mentioned earlier, that thought makes a lot of sense. The scheduling of those 200,000 plus I&I investments was based on projection of when we would do Basin 3 relative to discussions with DOE. Basin 3 was slated to be done last year and this year, and then follow on with these incremental additional I&I steps to fulfill our commitment under the I&I order. Since we've elected to delay Basin 3, it makes perfect sense to delay those I&I projects by the same amount. But they're already figured into the rates that we're collecting and the rate increases that are scheduled for the next couple of years as well.
Were you projecting a certain level of GFCs in that rate model too?
Yes.
Which you had to kind of toss out now because Shelton Hills hasn't started. That was a big driver of that.
Actually, that was tossed out a couple iterations of the model back, and we started slowly adding that back in, figured that we would let the Shelton Hills project in itself be kind of more of a bonus than anything else. So we'll have to see how the next couple of years go. We may have to do some adjustments in out years on that if we don't start seeing some of that come back. But
And how were some of the other bids just on this component? Was there anybody that was significantly, I mean, is that an option to take it from this guy and give it to
no,
somebody else?
we can't split them up like that. We only had one that was quite a bit higher. We had a approximately $1 million bid on this schedule.
On just the sewer line?
Just the sewer line. And then our original apparent low bidder was about $150,000 cheaper. He apparently figured a way to, either he missed something or he found a way to save himself some money on that one. The other 4 bidders, including our actual apparent low bidder, were all right in that $450,000 range. So
I still have a question about the possibility of withdrawing the bid process right now, finding some concrete funding for the sewer extension, and then putting it out for rebid.
That is always a possibility, given the nature of the work and the fact that we have this approximately 400-foot section that has to be done now. That simple not awarding the schedule probably doesn't work, but at a minimum, what I'm recommending at this point is that we award the schedule and then do as we did with Phase 3 of the treatment plant, where we immediately write a change order to back out the bulk of it, the improvement portion of it, and not the necessary portion to make room for the storm sewer, if that's the commission's decision not to fund the sewer work at this time.
So if we wanted to fund the sewer work, though, we couldn't do it that way? It would have to be all or nothing, right? Like, you can't take part of a bid out, award the bid, and then hire somebody else to come in and do?
You probably could. The reluctance I would have is, given now that you have two contractors, you have competing schedules, you were likely not to see any cost savings because of that.
Okay, I guess my concern is just being so late in the bidding cycle. You don't typically get your best bids at the end of the year. And so typically you get your best bids at the beginning of the construction. And so I'm wondering, I realize it would be a gamble.
You're on board, you're on track with that. However, based on what we've been seeing, we got really good bids, even though it was a later season bid. Everybody around us was seeing bids on similar work 10 to 30% higher than what we received. We expected to be actually short on the street funds based on the bids we were seeing coming in on other similar jobs. So, given our local circumstance, we actually got a really good bid on all of the pieces of work here.
Except for the sewer.
And I would say even on the sewer, we're $120,000 under the last engineer's estimate on that sewer work.
Mike, you guys were telling me that this was going to be a $250,000 add-on, not a $450,000 add-on.
That's
So
what
I'm not really buying that.
Well, that was what we originally thought based on a real gross assessment of general length. Two things happened. One, we added about 400 feet of this line that needed to be relocated because of the storm sewer. That we're getting covered. So, we're now down to about a $430,000 job. What we're seeing is, since we talked earlier in the year, the cost for utility work has really gone up. We got a really good bid on the water for whatever reason, across the board on all 6 bidders. Based on the last engineer's estimates done in late May, we expected both utility pieces to be about in the $500,000 range based on the current market. That was the escalation in the 6-month time frame.
Then that wasn't communicated to me and probably should have been, so we didn't surprise them. So
I think what as chair of this meeting, I think the idea is, I think we're all pretty much open to bring this back next week. I think we have a week or so to think about it. And, accurate information and bid numbers and all this stuff. It's not a simple decision, and I don't think we should treat it as a simple decision. So I guess what I would like to do is, and at this point, though, it does say that public comment on this proposed action item is necessary. So is there anyone from the public still alive out there that wants to speak about that? If there isn't, then I guess what I would like to do is request a motion maybe that we postpone this and bring this back under old business next week, or just do it. Yeah. Does that?
I got a couple more questions. Could you come back, Mike, with a better idea of what is available out there size-wise for potential development south of we saw the parcel map, but it really wasn't that clear, you know, what's really available and who owns it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to kind of gauge some interest. You know, I only know of one small piece along there that even expressed any interest. You know, I just, you know, I want to get the most bang for our buck if we do this, and, you know, like we're talking, there may be other places where it's better spent. You know, it's a tough decision to put a new road in without that under it, I know, but I'm just real worried how long it's going to sit there empty.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's a whole lot more information out there. I can tell you that from checking the parcel or the assessor's database to get the information I shared with the commission a few weeks
Or at
ago.
least how big some of those parcels are.
Again, within Beverly Heights, the parcels are actually aggregates of existing lots. As you saw in that one map, as few as 2 or 3 to a couple of them had like 10 or 12 lots that were part of a tax parcel. Talking with our planning staff, those are legitimate parcels or lots, and every lot that's in there under the original plat could be built on today with the appropriate infrastructure
Well, we don't know if
improvement.
they're all owned by one person or if there's a bunch of hodgepodge.
It's
there.
south of Lake Boulevard in that lower triangle. Those are larger conglomerations of ownership. A couple of the tax parcels are jointly owned. Appears probably by family holdings. But as you go north, a lot of those individual lots, the tax parcels for sure, are individual owners. There's not a lot of common ownership in that area north of Lake Boulevard.
I guess I could do that myself too, rather than burden you guys with it, get on the website and play around with that myself.
And then outside of Beverly Heights, basically between there and the end of the existing sewer system, there's approximately 50 to 60 acres that's really developable at this time directly off the Lake Boulevard project itself. And those are a total
That's
of...
adjacent to Delanty or further,
It's
west?
between Delanty and 2nd Street. There's some fairly large parcels in there that are in individual ownerships as small as about 4 to 5 acres. There's one 20-acre parcel that I can picture right off the top of my head. But all of these total about 50 acres total in
What
there.
can you get on an acre? 4 lots?
9, I believe it
9
is
lots?
under our
9
codes,
city
yeah.
lots.
I have one more request too, since it sounds like we're going to be discussing available sewer dollars. I don't have a real clear idea of the remainder of the money needed for Basin 3. I know we've all worked really hard to get that funding, and I know that every time I talk to anyone who is a potential funder, we need to finish this. I know that we had a turnover of, was it 1.3 million, and then we got an additional $1.5 million, not from the Sewer Funding Coalition, but from a capital, what do you call it? A capital appropriation.
Yeah, state capital appropriation.
And so is that all the money that we have for that? And then the second part of that is how much is left? How much is left?
We were fully funded, based on the most recent engineer's estimate, we were fully funded with the DOE funding package, the grant loan package. The most recent state capital allocation, basically, and my understanding would supplant a portion of the loan at this point, essentially increase our grant component of that overall package. Theoretically, it actually increased our overall funding for the project by $1.5 million because the original grant loan package is still sitting there in its entirety at $6.4 million, I believe it was.
And so what is the cost of the entire project, or the projected cost?
At the The last time it was looked at, the last engineer's estimate, which was earlier this year, it was right about $6.3 million, between there and $6.5 million with admin costs, so
So why have we decided not to move ahead with that?
that was a decision of the commission to delay construction for a reasonable amount of time within the parameters of the funding package to allow for additional grant funds to be
Okay.
sought.
Okay, and so how long can we hang on to this funding before we use it?
Based on the timelines in the grant, we need to be advertising that project for construction by late next year and building it in 2017 and 18.
And so there is a loan component of that project, and that's what we're waiting. What is the loan component of that project?
2 plus
It was about $4.5 million in loan and about $2 million in grant, approximately.
Okay, so there's quite a loan ratio.
Right.
Okay.
And the loan was partially low interest, partially market rate based on our mix of low income residential versus commercial, as well as 10% estimate of actually increased capacity that's in the
Okay.
in the design of the system, the North Cliff portion in particular.
Okay, so we have about 2.8 million in grant.
Correct. Yeah, that would be.
Let's verify that.
Yeah, we'll have to double check that, but it's somewhere in that vicinity, 2.8 to 3 million, somewhere in that range.
And what type of loan rates have we been offered for that?
That loan is at 2.3%.
Oh, that's that's
That was
the
a hardship one.
Yep.
that's the hard.
Yeah, we got 1.8% for the residential component of our ratepayers and 2.7 for the rest of it.
Okay.
And the composite ended up being 2.3%.
Okay. Thank you.
I kind of, if we're talking about Basin 3, I could say that I did take it upon myself to drive to the Capitol at least once a week through the legislative session and sit with representatives and our senators and talk to them about Basin 3. I have a folder of 15 to 20 different department heads I've talked to. If we can time it right, there's a strong perception that we can get another $2 million 2 years from now towards Basin 3 through the capital budget funding process. That's already been talked about. And it depends on if the timing, if we can, nothing's guaranteed, but we got 1.5 million, we got another 1.5 million, and that the figure that I am myself personally going for would be another 2 million, which will leave us about 1 million short. And it looks like the timing, it might not be an impossibility to do that. I like the idea of paying for something. So that's just from my communications with our state senators and representatives and sewer funding coalition partners about this. So far so good. We've got a few, and we have a few more to go. Is there any other questions about this subject?
I think I'm good for a week.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so we're putting this under old business next week. I think we concur that. There's no new business at this time. City administration report.
I'm still getting caught back up, but I think we'll decide whether to call this an action item. We figure out in the coming days how much more information we're going to have for you, and we'll just make a judgment how to schedule it based on what we learn in the next few days. So, and on my report, I'm just really getting caught back up. I'm all caught up on my email, and I'm just starting to get out ahead of things. But
All right.
anyhow.
Takes a few days.
Yeah.
General public comment, anyone like to speak? This would be the opportunity for the public to speak for a 3-minute time period. Nobody's signed in, so administration final touches.
Touches, any touches? No touches, Your
No
Honor.
touches. Our next meeting will be, our regular meeting will be August 24th at 2 p.m. here at the Civic Center. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.